Open it. Pull it open.
Oh, I know what you want.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Holy.
Mima, did you make it? Oh,
You made it.
what's a stuffed animal?
Hayden got one just like yours.
Oh, it's my dinosaur.
Yes, she did.
Do you love it? Do you love it?
Yeah, it's my Stegosaurus.
Oh.
I love it.
He was mad at me. Thank you to Mima.
He was mad at me.
Mima made it for
Go
you.
give me my hug.
Give Mima hugs.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
You are welcome for making the Stegosaurus for me.
You are welcome.
Is that not the reaction that we all want when we make a gift for a child? Every child needs one of these Snuggosauruses. It's a child's dinosaur body pillow, and the pattern is free from Yarnspirations. I will leave a link in the description. The first thing I'm like, and it's free, like I said, it's free. First thing I want to let you know is this main color is made of the Bernay blanket yarn, or Bernat, I'm not quite sure, and it's a size 6 in as far as the yarn is concerned. You could use any size 6, but it does recommend 3 skeins of the main color and 1 of the contrast. I found that I needed 4 skeins of the main color, and I did make this Dino twice, which you will see here. And you will need a size L crochet hook, which is an 8mm, so it's very large, and it does work up fast. I found this pattern when I was just searching for a dinosaur, which my grandson is totally into, to make for him, and I came across this. I had no idea it would be the size that it came out to be. So here you can see that the head is done. The directions are very good. You can follow them very simply. And I found that, knowing my grandchildren as I do, that this is the point when you've got the head finished, you've got the reduction done for the neck, and you've got maybe a little bit of the body starting to form. This is the time where you want to do the stitching for the face. The reason for that is because you can then tie knots in it. You really want, at least my grandkids like to kind of pick at things, and they pull out the stitching in a lot of my amigurumis. So I have learned that before I stuff them, I want to leave long tails on that stitching and give them 2 or 3 good knots tied together. You'll see how I do it in the video here to come. This is the second head of the second dinosaur that I made, and I didn't think that the face on the first one came out quite right. So I decided to use stitch markers to mark where I was going to do the stitching for the face on this one. You can see the ones down on the nose are for the V's of the nose, and the ones up on the head are for the eyes. I did find the center of the head, and then I placed my stitch markers. Here is for the nose, and I made sure that it lined up on the same line of stitching, and same with the peak on the V for the nose, lined up with the same line of stitching. Then I was able to do the same thing for the eyes, and I was able to kind of visualize it here using the stitch markers and make little minute adjustments in order to make it feel like it came out right. The pattern also indicates using a back stitch to do this embroidery, and I found when I did the back stitch that the embroidery just kind of sunk in between the stitches and really wasn't very visible. So I chose to use an outline embroidery stitch for all of the stitching, the eyes and the nose. And when I did it, I redid the first one with that, and then I did it with the second one. I was much, much happier with how that came out, and it was really nice and visible. Again, I was able to count the stitches so that I made sure that the eyes were the same size, they were the same height, they had about the same curve. And again, they were not perfect, but I was able to be much happier with them the second time, having used the stitch markers here. Now, the yarn I used for this second dino was also Bernat Blanket, but it was Bernat Blanket Confetti. And I did think he turned out really darling. However, I did look later and see that the confetti skeins of yarn have 176 yards of yarn, and the Bernat Blanket yarn has 220 yards. So I still made it with 4 skeins of the main color for this dino, but I had about 3 to 4 feet left when I was done. So I just made it. And so here we are. I am at this point in the head going to begin attaching these the stitching. Now here I'm doing it with the first dino, and I've got most of the body made. It meant that I had to go way down inside to attach that stitching. So here I am adding another skein. This yarn is so forgiving because it's plush and kind of velvety, almost like a soft velour sweater. So I was able to make just a regular knot, kind of a, I guess it's just an overhand knot, and make sure that the tails of the knot ended up inside. All your tails will be inside and closed in and stuffed, so you don't have to weave in almost any ends. It's wonderful as far as that's concerned. And so I just needed to tie a good, strong, secure knot there, and then make sure when I started crocheting that those tails, that the knot didn't pull through to the outside, and that the tails stayed nice and secure on the inside. And it appears to be holding really, really well. You'll see in some of the video later on here that when this guy gets played with, it's not easy on him. He kind of becomes a bouncing beanbag. And so I've done a lot of work to make sure that he is going to stay put, stay together, hold strong, and endure all the wonderful loving that he gets from all the children that just cannot seem to leave him alone. He's so soft and so touchable. You just want to hug him and just and rub on him. And as far as I know, every night since he's been given, he has been slept with in his bed and snuggled. And once you finish the increases, after the decrease for the neck, you work on some increases, and then you get to where you're working even in rounds. Once you start the even on the first row of the even round, I put a stitch marker. That allowed me to easily be able to measure the 20 inches that the pattern recommended for your even rounds, 20 inches. You can see here even on my mat that I am at 20 inches from my stitch marker down to the end. That's where you will begin the decreasing for the tail. This is where on this dino I began working on the stitching for the face. You can see I just referenced the pattern picture, which really is your best reference for what I was going to be working with. I used just a scrap ball of black yarn and a tapestry needle or a yarn needle. I did use a double strand of the black yarn. That allowed it to be a little thicker. Make 4 of the legs just exactly as the pattern says. Stuff them and sew them on really securely. They are going to get drag around and pulled around because this guy's so big by their legs sometimes. So get them on really securely. I used a knot when I was sewing them on. About every 4 or 5 stitches I gave it a knot and then kept on sewing. But now it's time to make the Steggy Spikes. Make the spikes exactly as the pattern says, including the 11th row. But you'll see in the 11th row there's in bold it says do not turn. Chain 1 and continue around the next 4 edges of the spike side and single crochet evenly around. Do not do that step. Stop on the 11th row at the end of the row. Stop right there, tie it off, and cut your thread and make a second Steggy bump. Exactly, I call them Steggy bumps, but spikes. Exactly as the first, stopping at the end of the 11th row. Do not turn. Then I will show you here how I hold 2 spikes together, making sure that they're in the same orientation. The point that where you began is at the top on both of them, and then single crochet them together all the way around the 2 sides, leaving the bottom side of your triangle open for stuffing and then for sewing, and leave a very long tail, long enough so that you can sew the Steggy spike all the way around with that thread and not have to add a thread. This, I found, made my Steggy spikes look spiky but still be very, very soft and lovable. I felt that the Steggy spikes in the picture, and granted it's just a picture, were very round and just looked kind of like snowballs or bumps. And a real true Stegosaurus has got spikes. So I found that by skipping that last round on those spikes and crocheting them together and not turning them inside out, which is what they recommended to do, but leaving them with that crocheted edge on the outside and then stuffing them and sewing them on, that they had a much more realistic, in air quotes, Stegosaurus spike look. So that was my last change that I made to this pattern that I felt made it a little bit better.